We're now
Okay,
live.
welcome everyone, wherever you are, and thank you for joining this webinar, whether you're directly on the webinar or whether you're following us on Facebook Live. This is, as you know, the closing webinar for the campaign Rethinking the Classroom After COVID-19, Insights and Innovations from Teachers. My name is Haldis Holst. I'm Deputy General Secretary of Education International and a teacher. And I will try to guide you through what I think is going to be an inspiring hour. Because we know that teachers and schools have responded in extraordinary, creative and innovative, dedicated ways to the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Disruption for teachers, for learners, for their families. They're consistently finding new, often unprecedented solutions that sometimes may challenge our traditional conceptualization of teaching and learning. Some of the changes and innovations that we have seen may well last far into the future, far beyond this pandemic, because we keep learning. The OECD, UNESCO, and the Teacher Task Force have been gathering and discussing the new insights that emerged during these difficult times with teachers from all around the world. Teachers globally were invited to share their insights through short videos, which are available, they're still there, at globalteachinginsights.org. They've already been discussed in greater focus during 3 virtual conversations on teaching earlier this month. This campaign is based on the fundamental notion that there is an amazing richness derived from the innovations developed by teachers, which needs to be captured, reflected upon, and ultimately should influence education systems more broadly. Today's event is to acknowledge, to learn, and to celebrate these innovations and take stock of some of the implications for the future of the profession. A couple of housekeeping items. You are, as an audience, invited to use the question and answer feature. You have a chat there, and to publicly respond to questions. You can pose questions to each other, and you can also pose questions to the teachers and Andreas and Borhin, that I'll come to in a minute, that are on the show. We may not be able to respond to all your questions or your comments, but we will note them and we will take them with us. But please feel inspired also to respond to each other, because we need to learn from each other. And please also use Twitter under the common hashtag Lessons for Education. Let's get the message out there beyond where we are. Now, who are we going to hear from? We have great speakers here. We have Andreas Schleicher, Director for Education and Skills at the OECD. We have Borhin Chakron, Director of the Division of Policies and Lifelong Learning at UNESCO. We have Catherine Gregory, Director of Teaching and Learning and Head of English at a school in the United Kingdom. We have Fernando Mesquita, Educational Leader at a school in Brazil. We have Felipe Matos, History and Citizenship Teacher in Portugal. And we have Irene Krista Lutumas, an elementary school teacher in Indonesia. And we're going to hear from them all. But we're going to start with hearing from Andreas Schleicher from the OECD, who's going to give us a short introduction to what may be education post-COVID-19. So over to you, Andreas.
Hello, and thank you, Aldis. And also, I want to really start by thanking my colleagues from UNESCO and the TTF for the just fantastic collaboration on this campaign. Actually, today is also the day where Education International and the OECD are launching a set of principles for an effective and equitable recovery from the pandemic, because the one lesson we've all learned is we are only going to get out of this crisis if the teaching profession and governments learn to work very effectively together. Now, the pandemic has struck us hard. You can see here on the screen the learning losses that we have seen. Massive disruption in education in countries like Colombia and Costa Rica. Schools were closed for almost the entire school year. But what's so interesting is, the pandemic itself is not completely explaining those results. If you mark the infection rates in countries by the size of the bubble here, you see they are all over the place. You have some countries that were quite badly hit by the pandemic, and still they were able to keep their schools running, to keep education going, even when, the pandemic was ravaging in the country. So infection rates do not only explain the school closures. In fact, one of the most intriguing results for us is that the best predictor of schooling results is the quality of education itself, the capacity and creativity of teachers at the front line, the resilience and flexibility of the structures, the quality of learning environments. Suddenly you can see how those two things line up. Where education systems had a lot of, frontline capacity, they were able to, recover and resist through this pandemic, keeping things open. Of course, what we have also seen is that overnight teachers around the world were expected to innovate technologically, innovate socially, and sometimes, they were totally left on their own devices to do this. We've seen a lot of new solutions emerge. You can see that here on the screen. It's not just about online learning. Technology also often meant, television, teachers featuring on programs, mobile phone communication, packages of resources. Teachers have actually been extremely creative to draw on the resources that were available. And in our crowdsourcing campaign, we saw some amazing innovations from teachers, not only to keep learning going, but to ensure that teaching was and remained engaging, and that it's also remained inclusive. For example, we saw stories from Kazakhstan of using memes to support physics teaching. Or you see Anne from France, who worked with her primary students on a journal that documented almost everything that students did at home, from formative experiences in the kitchen to new arts projects done at home now. And as we look to the future of education, one of the key questions is, how can we build on those ideas, those experiences now? How can we stop pushing new and sometimes old ideas top down into schools and, get better at finding the good ideas and scaling and spreading them? I think the pandemic has, shown us there's so much we can all learn. Of course, some students were able to find their way around closed school doors, through alternative learning opportunities. They were well supported by their parents, well supported by their teachers. They had learned how to learn. Those were the good cases. But then you had many students who, remained shut out when their school shut down, particularly those from the most marginalized groups who did not have access to digital resources, and sometimes, lacked the support, maybe even the motivation to learn on their own. As you can see here in the chart, many school systems have put in place a lot of measures, fortunately, to support those those most at risks. In fact, when you look at the measures here, you ask yourself, why did we need a pandemic to make those things happen? That should be the new normal, that we actually, align resources better with needs. But there's, despite all of these measures of support, there's, I think, one thing that we have all learned also during the pandemic is that learning is not a transactional process. It's always a social, it's always a relational phenomenon. In this crisis, teachers were not just instructors. They also became great coaches, great mentors, great facilitators. And we can see many examples in the crowdsourcing campaign where this was happening. We have seen, for example, here, let me show, Nana Gulic in Croatia, encouraging young people to embrace their emotions, their feelings, and to talk about those emotions and feelings together and with their teacher. Or we have, from the Baya Atoll School in the Maldives, promoting a community garden to support the mental well-being of students and their families. An entirely new role for education, but shouldn't we make this part of the new normal? A more holistic, view on education well beyond the academic learning. Teachers of course, also faced a very steep learning curve. They had to rely on each other more than ever before. They had to find new ways to support each other, to exchange and to collaborate. And you can see here a lot has gone on in terms of strengthening professional collaboration, strengthening technical expertise. We've seen really a lot of experiences and initiatives to support teachers in the transition to the new normal, to the digital spaces. Now, we have also seen an extraordinary range of initiatives coming from teachers themselves. Again, the crowdsourcing campaign shows actually this was not about, teachers going back to university. No, this was about teachers teaching teachers, teachers helping, supporting each other, sharing solutions. I was very much touched by the testimonial of Sashi on her feedback and exchange process with teachers online. You can really see, teachers becoming sort of very, very much engaged in this. And later on, I think we're going to hear from Irene Christ-Thomas from Indonesia on how she encouraged collaboration between actually hundreds of Indonesian teachers, sort of putting it to scale, building communities of teachers. That seems the future of education. There were ideas from teachers all over the world, like the ones you can find now on the Global Teaching Insights platform. And I want to say we designed this space precisely to help you learn from the experiences of colleagues, in other places, in other countries. Sometimes we learn a lot, from people who are different from us, who have entirely different ideas. It's the first collaborative space internationally in a digital kind of world. So I very much encourage you to look at this, also to contribute to this, to engage in this, to make your own examples visible, as the borders of our countries remain shut and people start even fighting over vaccines, let's set a good example and, foster collaboration in the education profession. And again, that's exactly what the OECD, UNESCO and the TTF have done in this campaign to share innovations during the pandemic. But let's this to be the beginning, not the end of this. And if I really think, if our education systems knew what teachers know, we would be in a very, very different place. We are not yet good enough to sharing experiences. And most importantly, we need to look forward. One thing is clear, the future will always surprise us. Artificial intelligence is going to put our thinking about the future of education totally to the test. The kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, have become easy to digitize. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are good at repeating what we tell them. What does it mean to be a first-class human in tomorrow's world? That's what education, that's what teachers will need to figure out. Climate change is probably going to be more disruptive for our lives in the long run than, a pandemic today. How do we prepare ourselves for this? How do we make ourselves more resilient? Well, I'm going to hand here over to Boreen Shakrun from UNESCO to look at the campaign in more detail. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And I think the importance of you highlighting the professional communities, they can be online, but they can also be face-to-face, just like teaching and learning can be, and the importance that we all collaborate. And also, I would like to thank OECD for cooperating with the teaching profession on the 10 principles that we launched this morning that you referenced to on effective and equitable education recovery. You can visit and read more about it, but also the cooperation with UNESCO. So Boreen, we'd very much like to hear from you too, that what did we learn from the campaign?
Thank you, Handes, and thanks to Andreas, to Anna, to OECD colleagues for great collaboration. Warm greetings to all the audience that is joining us today. Bonjour, sabah al-khair, assalamu alaikum, dobry den, ni hao, bom dia. I know we have also Portuguese and Brazilian colleagues, so buenos dias to all colleagues who have joined us from all over the world. We are really pleased, and we are very happy for this collaboration that we started with OECD during the last few months, and the results are great today. First of all, let me recall that we are facing the most, I would say, radical disruption that education system have faced during the last decades. And our organization, since the beginning, has been tracking this disruption, looking at the school closures, looking at the impact on teachers. And we know that more than 73 million teachers are affected by the crisis. But we have been also looking at how teachers' vaccination is taking place. Are teachers considered as frontline workers or not? And how we can encourage governments to prioritize teachers in the vaccination campaign. So there is a lot to do together. And today we are looking at the innovation, the practices, how teachers have been coping with the challenges. And we have seen that there is a creativity in the crisis. And this is something that we noted from the different initiatives that we have mapped, the good practices that some of them Andreas just mentioned earlier. But of course, when looking at innovation, we need to think about who are the stakeholders of this innovation and how this innovation happens. And I believe that we have seen, of course, top-down instruction and initiative from government, but we have seen 1,000 of innovation across the world that are bottom-up, that engage the teachers, that get teachers to learn together and to engage in responding to the crisis at their level, at their context, in communities, in schools, in colleges, in different type of education institutions. Teachers have ensured the continuity of learning through also support to students and socio-emotional support, to the families as well. They have collaborated and they have strengthened their capacities by engaging in a stronger collaboration. These are some of the overarching topics that we have covered in the last 3 webinars that we have hosted together with the UNESCO Teacher Task Force and OECD team, in which we aim to hear from teachers and to learn from teachers what were their practices, what they have done, and how they have collaborated. And I wish to share with you today what we have learned from these 3 events that we organized during the last weeks. And just to start a bit, during the first webinar, we have heard from different teachers from Indonesia, Ghana, India, the Maldives, and Suriname about their experiences and innovation in ensuring the continuity of learning. Teachers have put students back at their center using technology to allow self-paced learning. They have engaged their students with creative and enjoyable teaching methods to maintain social connections and to stimulate their interests as well. They have used different strategies, mixing subjects and tools, and have promoted new activities and programs to ensure learning during school closure. As part of the initiatives, member organizations of the task force joined to make comments on the innovation presented by teachers. The organization who contributed to this topic were the Inter-American Teacher Education Network and Annabelle from Belgium. A teacher from Suriname representing the Inter-American Teacher Education Network joined the discussion and highlighted the importance of involving teachers in the policy making, giving them more autonomy and recognizing their positive impact to spread change. As you can see from the results of the poll taken during the event, building participation and assessing students during the past year were identified as the most challenging and what teachers have most changed during distance education and learning. This view was shared by speakers as well and participants during the event. Similarly, engaging and encouraging students' participation was discussed among teachers who noted that the pandemic disrupted the traditional relationship between students and teachers. Nevertheless, we know that students have been the greatest source of inspiration for teachers to keep innovating and to engaging further. Teachers and education personnel have faced the demand of providing socio-emotional and psychological support to students, to their families as well, which is an aspect of their work that has become increasingly important during the pandemic. Obviously, a traditional teacher training probably will not include socio-emotional support and engaging with families. But we know that now this is something that will be very important going forward, and that we need to give attention to both pre-service training and in-service training on how to support teachers, how to give them the skills to engage in supporting learners in their socio-emotional challenges and supporting their skills. In the second conversation, we heard teachers from Hong Kong, from Croatia, Colombia, and the Philippines, sharing their innovation to address the need to provide socio-emotional support. Teachers have guided students to identify, label, and express their feeling in positive ways. This has proven to be useful strategies, as one of the greatest challenges to provide socio-emotional support is to encourage students to talk about their emotions. And it was highlighted by an expert reviewer from the Lego Foundation on the organizations who reviewed these videos. Of course, socio-emotional support includes also the relationship between teachers and families. We tend to neglect the family's role. All of us, particularly if we have children at home, we became teachers. We had to support our kids, but we had to also to engage with the teachers and understand what is happening, how to what to know about what's happening with the curriculum, with the planning of the remote learning, when it is taking place, when it is not taking place, synchronous, asynchronous learning. So this support was critical. And of course, the relationship between teachers and families has played an important part on students learning at home. Teachers have come with innovative ways to support families and have involved them in children's learning through music and other activities at home, promoting more channels of communication, combining different channels that we have seen. Of course, it's very important going forward that we acknowledge and pay attention to emotions. This is becoming increasingly important. Empathy, teamwork, collaboration have appeared as essential skills during the COVID and will take place forward in the future as a set of skills that have to be developed both by teachers but also by learners. This is also a points to the critical role that teachers play in providing support to children. And of course, the support is not only about teaching and learning. In some countries and in many countries, it's about nutrition, it's about health, it's about other social services that the school plays and that cannot happen remotely. And that's why this combination of different learning opportunities, the hybrid learning dimension will become central in any education system going forward. And of course, at the center is the relationship between teachers and their students. The last event that we had was a third conversation on the stronger support to professions and the peer learning dimension. And we have heard from teachers from Indonesia, Mexico, Moldova, and the Maldives. They have come together to discuss peer support and peer learning. Around the world, teachers have been at the heart of much of this transformation, and Andreas was referring to that. It resulted in strengthening teachers' communities of practices that facilitated knowledge, exchange, and collaboration within and across borders. And it builds capacities of teachers to support one another and build a stronger profession that is now not only an individual professional, but also a community of professionals. And this is very important, I believe, for the future of the teaching profession. Similar to the previous webinars, the two organizations have contributed to this topic with their review. We get support and intervention from Belgium-based NGO VVOB, Education for Development, and the Global School Leaders. The representative from VVOB joined the discussion with teachers, and we have learned few lessons there. First of all, the importance of the collaboration to build bridges interdisciplinary beyond national borders as well, and among different capacities, promoting inclusive education. We have also learned that the role of the feedback is crucial, and it's about giving and receiving. It's about engaging and maintaining a learning environment. Teachers and more time and resources to exchange, needed more time and resources to exchange and collaborate. This is a key point in which schools and learning organizations have to give attention and promote and create those spaces of learning and engagement. And this is what we have heard from VVOB, for example. I will say that out of the event, an unanimous voice of teachers have referred to the importance of keeping sharing resources and experiences. And the initiative we are sharing with you today is, I believe, an important global initiative. But of course, it has to be layered down at regional, local, national level that you may take the lead in this. And of course, OECD and UNESCO will be very happy to support. Finally, teachers responded to that managing online learning environment and using ICT tools have been what they have most learned from their peers during the time of crisis. Moving into the future, the greatest challenge, of course, is to maintain and engage this sustainable and stronger profession going forward. But what we have learned on this peer learning from the insight from the teachers is not necessarily supported from what we have learned from the joint survey from UNESCO, OECD, World Bank, and UNICEF. We have seen that most of the attention from government have been given to professional development of teachers. Around 97% of surveys countries reported the provision of teachers support in the transition to remote learning. The most common support has been about distance teaching, teaching content, adaptation, and professional support. But less so maybe attention to the peer learning and the exchange and the community of practices. But we have seen interesting case, for example, from Korea, where the government, together with teachers, have set up a community of practice of 10,000 teachers who became the backbone of this peer learning and of the collaboration across the country. So there is a good example that we can learn from in terms of the peer learning, and I'm sure you have also other examples in your own countries. So let me finish with some key lessons that we have learned from the engagement with teachers. All this innovation, of course, speaks about the importance of work of teachers to recover from the global pandemic, to build resilience and reimagine education, and attest about the talent and the creativity of the teaching profession when there is an opportunity to unveil and to unleash that potential. In order to foster teacher innovation, education system have to make room for this participation of teachers and incentivizing the agency and the autonomy and their capacity to lead at local level in their communities. That's perhaps one of the biggest challenges that education system will face. And they have levers. On one hand, they have to create channels for participation of teachers. And on another hand, they have to involve teachers in the decision making. This is very critical to listen to the social partners. And of course, Education International will not contradict me in this case. Giving the challenges and the breadth and the depth of the changes, obviously, we know, and Andreas was mentioning to the different transitions that societies have to take. Of course, there is the digital transitions. There is the sustainability transition. But let's not forget that there are other challenges, like issues related to violent extremism, issues of intolerance, issues of global citizenship that will have to be taken into consideration. How to respond to those challenges, but also how to respond to the disruption in the economies, in the labor market, which will demand new type of skills. We know that some of the skills are about transversal skills, sustainability skills, but new skills are emerging that we will have to map, understand, and create the response and capacity teachers to offer them. That's what we have to take going forward, and would be very pleased to hear today again from teachers and learn with them, from them in this occasion. Thank you very much. Over to you, Haldis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farheen. And we're going to quickly move over to those teachers' voices. But while we're doing that, they'll also encourage you to participate in the chat. I see it's already very active, and that is inspiring. But think carefully, there will be a chat question running. What insights from that teachers have shared during the crowdsourcing campaign have you found the most insightful? What is your major takeaway? While you are thinking about that and responding, I will call on our 4 teachers. We have Catherine, Fernando, Philippa, and Irene. And we sort of do in the sequence that we had the conversations prior here. And in the first conversation, it focused on learning continuity. Moving to the virtual world was a challenge. And Catherine, school deputy head and head of English department in the UK, in your video, you talked about your top 5 adaptations to survive during these challenging times. And I must say, I really liked your question, what motivates learning? But that was mine. As schools have just reopened in the UK, are there any lessons emerging after this second round of school closures? And let's hope there won't be a third. Which adaptations do you like to keep when you move to a new normal?
Yeah, thank you. So it is a good question. And you were right, it was a huge challenge. And with almost no warning, the way we worked had to change overnight. And with the focus on ensuring continuity of learning, it was a real problem. So we needed to facilitate student progress. And I'd say initially we used more traditional teaching methods through digital platforms, but very quickly we felt that didn't work, and we felt that we weren't adequately compensating for the fact we were no longer co-present in the classroom. And as school closures continued, we adapted and really capitalised on technology, and we started to use it as a tool to facilitate student-teacher interaction, peer collaboration, independent projects, live marking, feedback. We also invited remote guest speakers, peer collaboration and seminars. So perhaps the main lesson from the second lockdown is that learning can take place anywhere. And given the right circumstances, of course, which highlights the importance of ensuring that all students have access to the right resources. And that's something for each country to consider. The school classroom is an amazing place, and we believe that that's where the magic happens. But learning is not restricted to the classroom. And our older students in particular returned from the second lockdown with a deep understanding of some of the more complex concepts that we teach. And perhaps that was because their educational diet had been so varied. They'd had more ownership over it, more control. They'd had a combination of teacher-led sessions via Google Meet, private reading, online lectures from other institutions, and that was all running alongside teacher-led lessons. So it created a paradox where they were simultaneously alone and isolated at home, whilst being connected and working collaboratively with their peers more than perhaps they ever had before. So in short, they explored rather than accepted information. And fundamentally, though, technology can amplify good teaching, but it can't replace it. And we wanted to look how to continue to combine both. So as we move forward, we're going to continue to combine learning in school and out of school. We're going to use flipped learning methods to encourage active engagement with material prior to classwork instead of receiving curriculum content. These are not new ideas, of course, but the COVID pandemic shocked us into changing quickly, and it forced us to really examine why we do what we do. And as our schools have reopened here in the UK, despite all the negative impact as a result of COVID, we've been provided with a unique opportunity to rebuild a more effective and a more equitable system that equips young people with the skills for success beyond school, I think.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. That is inspiring thinking what you don't forget, but keep learning and moving forward and keeping. And we're going to move to Fernando, school leader from Brazil, who stressed the importance of involving the entire school community in designing the virtual learning experiencing, and particularly to take students' perspectives seriously into account. Could you share a concrete example of why taking students' perspectives made a difference, as well as your lessons learned?
Thanks for your question, Haldis. Definitely surveying students, parents, and teachers has allowed us to be more agile in identifying and in fixing areas for improvement, right? Everyone, the whole community wanted the virtual program to work. So we requested feedback and we requested input from students, parents, teachers, and this feedback allowed us to make modifications like adjusting the workload, right? At first, we were assigning too much, right? So we've adjusted, according to their feedback, we've adjusted the workload, right? We started doing daily social and emotional check-ins, which is really aligned with what was said here in this meeting today, right? We felt that some students, they missed that social interaction, right? And education is not transactional. Now, this is in my head right now. it is social, right? So we need to be able to provide those opportunities. We also prioritize learning standards to focus on what matters most to students moving forward. We know and we are aware that we can't cover the curriculum in the same way we used to cover, right? And most importantly, we tracked perceptions of progress and well-being, right? So these requests for feedback and input enabled us to fix those areas and to provide learning support and counseling services for those who really needed it, right? Because it's super important to be able to provide the services where the services are needed. And my tip to school administrators is request input, request feedback, right? From all stakeholders. We are not alone in this, right? And we have to start sharing and reaching out to people and asking for help, right? So we can be agile, right? And responsive to students' needs and focused on student learning, right? For me, schools are collective efforts to promote learning and to promote development. And we need to be reaching out to others collectively, right? Because a school is not just the administrators, right? Not just the students, not just the parents, it's everybody together, right? As to lessons learned, I would say that some keys to our success were developing strong partnerships with parents and collaborating with other schools. Definitely collaborating with other schools, exchanging expertise and looking to solve common problems and to overcome common challenges, because we all had similar challenges, right? And why not learn from people who have already tried something and that worked, right? But I think my most important tip has to do with well-being and social and emotional learning. We need to be able to provide opportunities for students and teachers and families to experience that focus on social and emotional learning, because that's the foundation for the success of students.
Thank you so much, Fernando. And that sort of references when we move forward to lessons from the second conversation that focused on social emotional support. And today we have Filipa with us from Portugal, who stressed the importance in her video of helping students develop their own voice through a project to overcome cultural fears at a time of, perhaps some will say, global backlash. Literally building bridges in a time of isolation. What are the lessons that you in particular have learned about empowering students that we can take forward?
Thank you very much for your question. Well, I think the most important lesson I have learned is that there is really no difference between citizenship and digital citizenship, not anymore. And perhaps maybe there are 7 other lessons that are connected to this one. The first would be to create safe communication channels in the future too, both formal and informal, presential and by distance, in trying to engage the students in the creation of the rules of these spaces. And this can be made at a school level, like Students' Council, online and offline, but also at our class level, creating spaces and moments online and offline to share. Second lesson, maybe it could be about create a vision, to clearly create a vision towards the development of competences. And for that, we must choose directions and themes. For example, in our school, we are focused on democracy, inclusion, media literacy, and environment. So all activities are connected to these 4 themes. Another lesson could be to create projects, to create relationships, because the best way to develop students' voice, even during critical times, is through their engagement in projects. In projects could be made by a class level, but also at an international level. So in a logic of continuity, and online and offline, of course. I would like to give example. Here in my school, we are focused on media literacy too, and we have a school newsroom that began before the pandemic and continued during the pandemic. And was important because the bonds that were created before the pandemic continued and even got stronger during the pandemic. So it is very important to create this on both worlds, online and offline. Fourth lesson, maybe it could be, I don't know, to find your own voice as teacher, because we can only help our students to develop their voices if we find our own voice and our own role in emergency times and in the future. Another thing that Fernando told, and I think it's very important, is to invest in international projects in a time when frontiers are being closed. International experiences are very important for citizenship and future of citizenship. We continued an interchange with Kotor, Montenegro, during the pandemic, but began before the pandemic, and it was also very important for children to share their problems and try to overcome them together. Last lesson, maybe it would be that we should all think about redesigning learning environments, bringing the online to the offline shadow. So this experience we had under the lockdown, now even in the face-to-face learning, we had to bring it to the classroom, to develop students' confidence on both worlds, online and offline. So we should, I really think we should redesign and rethink school and classroom and citizenship with a diversity of voices. And these voices should influence school decisions, our roles, our classes, and even the way we are doing our assessment. And that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Philippa. Yes, you're so right that as teachers, we need to start by finding our own voices and also by sharing them. And I think that sort of feeds into the theme of the third conversation that was on peer support among teachers, because it's only when you found your own voice that you can share it with others. And we're going to move to Irene in Indonesia. And I must say, Irene, when I watched your video, I really love it when you say that education should inspire our heart. But you also highlighted that we were all in this situation for the first time. So in a way, no teachers know, no matter how long they taught, they didn't have a clue when they started, but they have a clue now because they have experienced it. And I wonder, how do you see peer learning and professional exchange among teachers evolving with your online platform you have developed, and perhaps even at a wider scale? Are you with us, Irene?
I hope so. I'm very sorry because we face
we can hear you.
Connection disturbance. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, I am very nervous with the connection here because, but I hope that it went well. All right, so thank you so much for the questions. The point to clarify is, yes, some schools in Indonesia have been doing blended learning for some times, even before the outbreak happened. But the pandemic, the fear and the anxiety it carries really brings all the distant learning experience at square one. And so what do we do at the platform that we started, the Teach Inspire Indonesia, is we want to communicate the spirit that we are all in this together, that each member in the global, national, and regional community of educators has the responsibility, the opportunity, and the valuable contribution to the communal growth. And at first, it was a very strange idea to start the peer learning. We were dealing with barriers like generational gap, gender differences, hierarchy in the system that deals with numbers of years of teaching and the positions of teachers at school. And it was very hard to just start the atmosphere of collaborative learning among teachers. But then we were thinking of some ways to break through those barriers and force peer and collaborative learning. And what did we do is one time we invited a teacher friend who just started teaching for 2 months. And we intentionally introduced her as the first year teacher before she started her sharing. And she shared everything that she's been learning and doing for the past 2 months very amazingly. And by the end of the webinar, all the participants gave very positive feedback, and they feel encouraged that no matter how long we've been teaching, we have something that we can share and something that we can contribute to the communal growth of educators in our community. And we started to see things change, that the atmosphere of peer and collaborative learning grows stronger. We don't have all the participants, all the teachers to be confident right now to be speaking at our platform. But then even when they registered as participant, they started to make connections of what best practices being shared with their own experience. They started to share what it looks like in their classroom and asking for feedback. And they started to share alternative solutions for the best practices being shared by other teachers. They also started to share the struggle and asking for inputs from other teachers. So we think that there is a very amazing way to learn together. So not all of us get to be the speakers, but even as we get into the sessions of learning together, we see participants, friends, teacher friends, they ask critical questions, giving critical input and feedback to one another. And we also become more aware of how our personal identity as teachers, personal calling as teachers, personal teaching mission really connects us to one another. And we think that we as teachers also need to take care of our personal development in the pursuit of our professional development. And that's why we started another session. We initiated a new session in our platform where we gather the participants, the teachers in our network to just come and then shared how they've been doing over the week, over the months, what are the struggles. And it is for the first pilot project of starting that teachers virtual hangout, we call it like that. We feel that teachers do really need that. And when teachers are energized individually, personally, teachers start to come up with creative idea and innovations in their professional work as well. So we highlight those small connections of that we make between personal and professional growth as
Oops, I think we're losing you. We lost you there, Irene, but you made such important points. And I think it's so important to take with you that we need to focus, as we've said, on the well-being of our students, but we also need to focus on the well-being of teachers for them to be able to actually conduct the job. And so we need to take care of each other. I think now that we've listened to all these, for me, amazing teachers' voices, that it's perhaps about time to have a little poll. There's a multiple choice poll here that will be open now for 2 minutes. And you are encouraged to choose 2 of what you think to be the 2 greatest challenges to teaching and learning after the pandemic, if you can manage to choose 2. Is it the curriculum, knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values to be taught? Is it lesson preparation and planning? Is it teaching and learning strategies? Outreach and support to students at risk? Use of assessment to evaluate learning, excuse me? Organization of the school calendar and learning time? Organization of learning spaces? Parental and community engagement, professional collaboration, school leadership, or anything else that you can put in the chat. And sort of watching the blue jumping up and down on my screen, I sort of see teaching and learning strategies at the moment, but there seems to be support for all of it to a certain extent. but it's clear that from most of the voices we have heard, that teaching and learning strategies is something that we have learned a bit about during the pandemic, that may be positive, that we may need to change something in a normal world too. I also see quite a bit of support to outreach and support students at risk. Curriculum, that we need to, we've highlighted that learning and education is so much, it's a broad endeavor, and we need our curriculums to reflect that. So, if according to my screen, we're just about there of the 2 minutes, and teaching and learning strategies. That's our professional practice. That's our professional practice. So if we reflect on this, and we can't just focus on one, because there's so many elements that are interconnected here when we move forward. If I circle back now, and I'm going to encourage you very briefly, Andreas and Borhin, because we're sort of running a bit over time, but can you very briefly reflect on how can education systems recognize and learn from the initiatives, also perhaps reflecting the poll here during the crisis to build back differently. Andreas, you want to start with a 1 minute power speech?
Yeah, you know, I think it's not about building back differently, but building forward really differently. Now, I think that's what, and I think many of the keywords have been made by teachers here, is about understanding the importance of the social, the relational dimension, the social emotional skills, is about building the bridge between the online and the offline work after the pandemic, I think. But most importantly, I think the points were made about building powerful communities in the teaching profession. I think, you know, there is, in this moment of crisis, don't ask yourself how well people follow your instructions. Ask yourself how well your people can effectively collaborate. And I think this is the moment to build a global teaching profession.
Borhin?
Yeah, I would like to build on what Andreas said, and 3 points that are critical from my point of view. One is how we can create incentives for sustainable development of this community of practices, and what intervention could be considered both from decision makers, from school managers. So that's an aspect that probably will be important to consider. And there were questions in the chat who, for example, supported the platform in Philippines. So there is this sustainability dimension. I think the second point is what are we reimagining education, or we are just looking at adjustment? And I think we need to reimagine, and teachers are at the center of that. There is no artificial intelligence that can replace the socialization role that teachers can play and the engagement that they can have. So I think this is a second aspect, and technology can help still in this aspect. Maybe something that was not said here, and we noticed that it is not necessarily the case in the education system. In the labor market, in the economies, there is an effort on how to recognize the skills and qualification acquired in non-formal and informal learning settings. Strangely enough, the way the systems function now, we have much less experiences in recognizing and validating the non-formal and informal learning of teachers. And engaging in community of practices is a great opportunity for developing new skills, for developing new knowledge and capacities. And I think this is something that we will need to give attention to, how we can validate and recognize and value the teachers' experiences in community of practices, and how this can be recognized in professional development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Borhin. And I think before we wrap up, there are so many questions and in the chat, and so many reflections that we really need to capture it. But although teaching and learning strategies sort of came up on top of the poll, there've been quite a lot of questions about curriculum too in the chat. And I don't know if one of the teachers want to respond to this, but do you feel that you need to revise your curriculum to acknowledge some of the more soft skills that you've highlighted in your stories and experiences, does this need to lead to change of curriculum? I see you nodding, Fernando. Do you want to take that one?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for posing that question. Yeah, I think for me it is crucial, and this is tied to what Andreas has said. What does it mean, right, to be a first-class human in tomorrow's world, right? This was very powerful, and we need to have curriculum to allow opportunities for children and young people to develop those skills. They are as important as academics, right? And we are seeing that now during the pandemic, resilience was crucial, right, for students. Creativity as well for students and teachers. So teamwork, collaboration, reaching out to others, right, taking initiative, being agile. We need to build that into our curriculum. Definitely, we'll need to prioritize learning standards, and we'll need to add social and emotional learning and other and creativity, collaboration, citizenship, like my other colleagues have mentioned. But we need to think of children as, we think children are whole people. They're not just brain. They're emotion as well. So we need to educate the whole child. And for this reason, we need to add to our curriculum to make it, to be able to have those first-class humans of the future.
Oh, great, Fernando. It sort of goes back to what Irene said in her video about education needs to also speak to the heart, that you need to speak to the whole human being. I don't know who I should challenge, perhaps you, Catherine. What do you think? Do we need to change our classrooms, the physical space that we teach in? Is there any learning points here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we still need them. I think we still need the coming together of young people on a particular pathway, a particular learning journey. But I think we also need to have running alongside that, our students connecting with students around the world and with other speakers and with other teachers, just as teachers collaborate globally. You know, we want to connect our young people, and that's where perhaps we can consider that learning and development and progress doesn't have to be restricted. You know, it doesn't have the boundaries, the physical boundaries of the classroom. So I'd encourage all schools to reach out to other schools to try and connect young people in whichever way they can.
Okay, you know, Philippa here, there's some questions on, you know, we've been doing this teaching in a disruptive environment, but when we go back to normal, that we will also have to fill gaps. And you will have children that come back also, and we need to support them, especially on social, emotional well-being. Do you have thoughts on how we can do that?
Yes, we need to have a safe place where they feel secure to share their disadvantage and perhaps psychological services too, and work with other institutions too, and with parents, because sometimes there is a confusion between giving tech devices to kids and digital literacy. So it is important to create maybe a task force on digital being online. But I would like to say it is important to include their voices in the students' voice, and it's a responsibility of public school to arrange a way to include them. And I would like only to add one thing. I think school has a very important role in times of emergency, giving voice to students and to the youngest people, because they might feel silenced in decisions that really matter about the world, and they are living this situation too. And this is the place where they spend most of the time. So we have to create that space for them to include them in these matters that they live too.
Thank you, Philippa. Very quickly, Irene, you spoke a lot about teacher leadership and how teachers can collaborate. Do you have a quick thought on the importance of school leadership in bringing this forward?
Yes, thank you for the very good questions. I think this initiative should start from the leaders. They should create a safe space for teachers to share their findings, to make initiatives. And I think not just that, but school leaders should think also that empowering parents as partners in children's education is also very, very important and need to be considered. So not just the teachers' professional development, but how we empower the parents and also the whole community to support the children's education, especially in this emerging time.
Thank you so much, Irene. And thank you everyone for participating through the chat. Submitting videos before there are so many interesting questions. Unfortunately, we don't have more time right now, but let us keep the professional conversation going wherever we can. And I would like to say in the end, what the teachers have said, let's keep the vision that education should inspire our hearts, also our minds, but also our actions, because we are educating citizens, as we said, for the future, and they need this knowledge, the skills, and the ability to make a better future for themselves. We've talked a lot about online learning. I've been observing the schools in my neighborhood during my lockdown home office year I've had here while I'm out walking. And I've also reflected on a renewed activity outdoors. It hasn't just been about going online. It has also been, as you're saying, finding new spaces for learning. And there's something in the bottom of my heart when I see small children at early childhood education institutions taking their naps in hammocks. When I walked in the woods last Friday, I met 4 teenage girls with 4 hammocks far into the woods. And I spoke to them and they said, yeah, we've never been here before, but we were here with our cohort at school earlier this week. So they've moved outdoors, come closer to nature, the tangible. Let's be able to combine that with what is out there in the online world so that we educate with all our tools, the tangible, the physical, nature, outdoors, indoors, cyberspace. Thank you very much to the OECD. Thank you very much to UNESCO. Thank you very much to the Teacher Task Force. I think I speak on behalf of the profession all over the world. We want to continue to tell our stories, to find our voice. We want to be listened to, and we will contribute to make sure that we can create systems that can support our practice. That's our common challenge. Thank you very much. Take care wherever you are and keep up the good work.